They conquered 1,000 worlds with ease. But the Zephyrian Empire forgot the one rule that could have saved them. Never give humans a reason to get creative. The Zephyrian Empire had swept across the galaxy for 3 millennia, conquering star system after star system with methodical precision. Their crystalline ships, powered by quantum cores and protected by energy shields that could deflect entire suns, had never known defeat. Admiral Kethavar stood on the bridge of his flagship, gazing at the blue world of Earth through the transparent aluminum viewport. The human defense fleet lay in ruins around them, twisted metal and debris that had once been humanity's pride. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, mandibles clicking with satisfaction, "the human fleet has been completely neutralized. Their orbital defenses are offline. We detect no further military resistance." Kethavar's 4 eyes gleamed with the purple light of triumph. This had been almost disappointingly easy. The humans had fought bravely. He would grant them that. But their primitive kinetic weapons and chemical rockets were no match for Zephyrian quantum technology. Their largest warship couldn't even breach his flagship's outer shields. "Excellent," signaled the human leadership. "Tell them we will accept their unconditional surrender aboard this vessel in 1 standard hour. Any delay will result in orbital bombardment of their major population centers." The message was transmitted to the surface. Earth's leaders, watching their world's last hope die in the void above, had no choice but to comply. 1 hour later, the Zephyrian transporter beam materialized 3 figures in the flagship's conference chamber. Admiral Kethavar expected to see Earth's military commanders, perhaps their political leaders, certainly someone radiating the defeat and desperation of a conquered species. Instead, he found himself facing a middle-aged human woman in a simple dark suit, flanked by 2 aides carrying briefcases. She appeared completely calm, almost serene, as she looked around the chamber filled with the Empire's highest-ranking officers. "I am Ambassador Sarah Chen, representing the United Earth government," she said, her voice steady and professional. "I understand you wish to discuss terms of surrender." Kethavar's mandibles twitched in what might have been amusement. "There are no terms to discuss, human. You will submit to Imperial authority. Your military forces will be disbanded. Your planet will be strip-mined for resources. Your people will serve the Empire as laborers or die resisting. This is the fate of all who oppose us." Ambassador Chen nodded thoughtfully, as if he had just offered her tea rather than describing the enslavement of her entire species. She opened her briefcase and withdrew a simple paper document. "I see. Well, before we proceed, I should mention that you appear to have forgotten something rather important." The Admiral's 4 eyes narrowed. "What could a defeated species possibly know that the Zephyrian Empire has forgotten?" Chen smiled. Not the desperate smile of someone grasping at false hope, but the patient smile of someone who held all the cards. Rule number 1. The conference chamber fell silent. Kethavar felt a chill run down his crystalline spine, though he couldn't explain why. Something in the human's tone and her absolute confidence triggered an ancient memory in the deepest files of his tactical database. What is rule number 1? He asked, hating how his voice seemed to have lost its commanding authority. Ambassador Chen placed the document on the conference table and slid it toward him. "Perhaps you should read this first. It's a historical document from your own Imperial archives, filed approximately 3,000 years ago." With trembling claws, Kethavar picked up the paper. The text was in ancient Imperial script, but the header made his blood freeze. "Classification, absolute secret, eyes only, Imperial High Command." He read aloud, his voice growing weaker with each word. "After extensive psychological and tactical analysis of species 7834H, designation humans, Imperial Command hereby establishes the following strategic directive. Under no circumstances shall the Zephyrian Empire engage in direct military confrontation with this species. Classification, avoid at all costs." The Admiral looked up, confusion and growing dread warring in his expression. This cannot be authentic. We just defeated your fleet. Your technology is primitive compared to ours." Chen's smile widened. "Keep reading, Admiral. The interesting part is just beginning." Kethavar's eyes darted back to the document. "Species 7834H demonstrates unprecedented tactical adaptability, technological innovation under pressure, and most critically, exhibits a psychological phenomenon termed spite-based escalation when faced with superior force. Recommendation: monitor from distance. Do not provoke. Do not engage. Do not conquer. I don't understand, Kethavar whispered, the document trembling in his claws. If this directive existed, why wasn't I briefed? Why did we attack? Ambassador Chen folded her hands calmly. Because, Admiral, your empire has grown so vast, so confident, so bureaucratically complex that the left hand no longer knows what the right hand is doing. That classified report was filed away and forgotten as your empire expanded across the galaxy. New generations of commanders arose who never learned the lessons their predecessors had discovered about humanity. She gestured to her aide, who opened his briefcase and began withdrawing folder after folder of documents. Your ancestors were wiser than you. They sent probe ships to observe us 3,000 years ago. They watched our development, studied our psychology, analyzed our potential. The Admiral's voice was barely a croak. What did they find? They found that humans have a very particular set of traits that make us problematic as enemies. We're adaptable. We can reverse engineer superior technology in remarkably short time frames. We're persistent. We don't surrender, we just retreat to fight another day. And most importantly, we're vindictive. Chen's voice took on a harder edge. When you push us to the edge of extinction, Admiral, we don't just fight back. We make it our life's work to ensure that whoever pushed us never, ever gets the chance to push anyone else ever again. Kethavar was beginning to understand, and the understanding terrified him. The probe reports noted something your ancestors found deeply disturbing. Chen continued, now pacing around the conference table as the Zephyrian officers sat frozen. Humans, when faced with impossible odds, don't just fight harder. We cheat, we innovate. We find ways to turn our weaknesses into weapons. She paused at the viewport, looking out at her planet below. Your probe ships observed our world wars, Admiral. They watched us develop nuclear weapons in just 4 years when faced with extinction. They saw us go from the first powered flight to landing on our moon in less than 70 years. They documented our tendency to make impossible technological leaps when sufficiently motivated. The Admiral's voice was hollow. What are you saying? I'm saying that your easy victory today was exactly what we wanted you to think. Chen turned back to face him, and now her smile was sharp as a blade. Did you really believe that in the 3,000 years since your ancestors observed us, we hadn't noticed their probe ships? Did you think we hadn't been preparing? She snapped her fingers. One of her aides activated a holographic projector. The air above the conference table shimmered and resolved into a 3-dimensional star chart. Admiral, I'd like you to meet the real human defense fleet. The hologram displayed not the wreckage floating around Earth, but thousands upon thousands of ships arranged in perfect formation throughout the solar system. They were sleek, obviously advanced, and completely invisible to Zephyrian sensors. Kethavar stared in horror. Impossible. Our sensors would have detected. Your sensors are detecting exactly what we want them to detect, Chen interrupted. 3,000 years ago, your probe ships gave us detailed scans of your technology. We've had 3 millennia to study it, understand it, and figure out how to defeat it. The hologram zoomed in on one of the hidden ships. Its hull appeared to be covered in a material that seemed to bend light around itself. Quantum stealth plating, Chen explained casually. We borrowed the concept from your own ship's databanks. Amazing what you can accomplish when you're sufficiently motivated to avoid extinction. Another aide stepped forward and activated a second hologram. This one showed the interior of the Zephyrian flagship, their current location, but with dozens of small, spider-like devices attached to critical systems throughout the ship. While you were accepting our surrender, Chen said, our nanobots have been systematically infiltrating every major system on your ship and throughout your fleet. They've been learning, adapting, and preparing. Kethavar frantically activated his personal communicator. Bridge, run full internal diagnostics. Check all systems for... The communicator crackled with static before a calm human voice responded. I'm sorry, Admiral, but your communications are currently under our control. This is Captain Rodriguez of Earth Defense Command. Your weapons, shields, life support, and navigation are now completely compromised. Please remain calm. Ambassador Chen walked over to where Kethavar sat slumped in his chair, his 4 eyes wide with shock and disbelief. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but implacable. Now, Admiral, let's discuss terms. But first, let me explain rule number 1. Since your empire seems to have forgotten it, she leaned forward, and suddenly Kethavar could see in her eyes the same relentless determination that had driven humanity to survive ice ages, world wars, plagues, and now an alien invasion. Rule number 1 is simple. Never give humans a reason to get creative. Because when you threaten our existence, when you push us to the brink, when you force us to choose between surrender and survival, we will always choose survival, and we will make that choice in ways you never saw coming. The Admiral found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. What do you want? What we've always wanted, Admiral. To be left alone. Your Empire has 2 choices. She held up one finger. Choice 1. You withdraw from our space, you mark our sector as off-limits, and you forget you ever found us. In return, we'll pretend this invasion never happened. She held up a second finger and her smile turned predatory. Choice 2. You continue this war and discover exactly why your ancestors classified us as a void at all costs. Because, Admiral, what you've seen today is just a preview. You've seen us react to a single invasion fleet. You haven't seen what we'll do when we decide your entire empire needs to be stopped. Kethvar looked around the conference chamber at his officers, all of whom were staring at their now useless control devices and weapons. You're threatening the entire Zephyrian Empire? Your single planet against our 1,000 worlds? Ambassador Chen laughed, and the sound was both musical and terrifying. Admiral, you still don't understand. We're not threatening your empire. We're offering to save it. She gestured to the hologram showing the hidden human fleet. Do you see those ships, Admiral? Each one carries enough firepower to sterilize a planet. But more importantly, each one carries something far more dangerous, human ingenuity. The hologram shifted, showing schematic after schematic of impossible technologies. Faster-than-light drives that made Zephyrian quantum cores look primitive. Weapons that could destabilize stars, and worst of all, manufacturing systems that could replicate and improve themselves. We've had 3,000 years to prepare for this day, Admiral. 3,000 years to study your technology. To imagine what we'd do if you ever came for us. 3,000 years to get creative. She walked to the viewport again, looking out at Earth. But here's what your ancestors understood that you've forgotten. Humans are not conquerors by nature. We're survivors. We don't want your empire. We just want you to leave us alone. Chen turned back to face the Admiral. However, if you force us to act, if you make survival require the elimination of the threat, well, then we'll eliminate the threat. All of it. Every ship, every world, every trace of the Zephyrian Empire, until the galaxy is safe for humanity and every other species you've conquered. The conference chamber was silent except for the subtle hum of ship systems. Systems now controlled by human nanobots. That's rule number 1, Admiral. Don't give humans a reason to get creative. Don't threaten our survival. Because if you do, we won't just fight back. We'll make sure the threat never threatens anyone ever again. Admiral Kethvar looked at the document in his claws, then at the holographic display showing the vast human fleet that had been invisible to his sensors, then at the calm face of Ambassador Chen. Everything he had believed about Zephyrian superiority was crumbling around him. Your ancestors were wise, Admiral, Chen said softly. They recognized what we are. A species that thrives on adversity, that turns every defeat into a lesson, every threat into an opportunity to evolve. They understood that victory against humans isn't measured in battles won, but in whether the war ever ends. She gestured to her aide, who produced another document. This is a proposed non-aggression treaty. You withdraw your forces, mark our space as off-limits, and both our species go back to pretending the other doesn't exist. Everyone wins. Kethvar stared at the treaty. And if I refuse? Chen's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Then, Admiral, you'll discover why we call ourselves the most dangerous species in the galaxy when we're properly motivated. You'll learn why your probe ship's final report recommended that the Zephyrian Empire should run, not walk, away from any contact with humanity. She paused, letting the words sink in. And you'll understand why rule number 1 wasn't just a tactical suggestion, Admiral. It was a survival strategy. For your empire, not for us. The Admiral looked around at his officers, reading the fear and uncertainty in their eyes. His tactical database was screaming warnings now. Probability matrices showing cascading failure scenarios. Projected casualties in the trillions. The complete collapse of Imperial infrastructure. With trembling claws, he reached for the treaty document. 3 hours later, the Zephyrian fleet began its withdrawal from the Terran system. Their quantum drives engaged, bending space-time around the massive crystalline ships as they departed into the void between stars. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Kethvar watched Earth shrink in his viewport. The human ambassador had been correct about everything. His fleet systems remained compromised, their weapons useless, their shields offline. Even now, human nanobots were ensuring that the Zephyrians could do nothing but retreat. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human planet." "Put it through." Ambassador Chen's image appeared on the main screen. She was standing in what appeared to be a command center, surrounded by humans monitoring displays showing the Zephyrian withdrawal. "Admiral, I wanted to personally ensure your departure went smoothly. I also wanted to leave you with one final thought." Kethvar nodded wearily. "What is it, Ambassador?" "Your empire has ruled through fear for 3,000 years. You've conquered species after species because they were weaker, less advanced, more easily intimidated." Her expression was serious now, without the hint of a smile. "But remember this, Admiral. We didn't defeat you through superior firepower or advanced technology, though we had both. We defeated you by being human." She leaned forward slightly. "We defeated you because humans, when pushed to the edge of extinction, don't just fight back. We learn, we adapt. We become something our enemies never expected and can't prepare for." The transmission paused as Chen seemed to consider her next words carefully. "Your empire will face that choice with other species. Admiral, remember today, remember rule number 1. Because the next species you encounter might not be as reasonable as we are. They might not offer you the choice to withdraw." The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar staring at the blank screen. As his fleet jumped to hyperspace fleeing the Terran system, the Admiral made a mental note to ensure that the classified report about species 7834H would never again be buried in the Imperial archives. Some lessons, he realized, were too important to forget. Behind them, Earth continued its silent rotation, looking peaceful and harmless in the void. But Admiral Kethvar would never again make the mistake of judging a species by appearances. He had learned rule number 1 the hard way. Never underestimate humans when their survival is at stake. Author's note. This HFY Humanity HFY story explores the classic science fiction theme of humans as the dark horse species, seemingly primitive but possessing unique psychological and cultural traits that make them formidable opponents when sufficiently motivated. The story emphasizes strategic thinking, preparation, and the human capacity for innovation under pressure rather than relying on superior firepower or technology.